without wasting time.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. On behalf of IRSA, I welcome you all in today's second session on hypothesis formulation in research. And my heart fills with pride to introduce to you all to the speaker of today's session, Professor Ashutosh Kumar from Department of Political Science, Punjab University, Chandigarh. Uh, I don't want to waste time in reading
Yes,
his
let's start. Let's
profile.
start. Let's start.
Yes.
Let's
So,
start. So
but
thank you very much for the group to invite me. Basically, this is not a topic which is of my first choice. I wanted to speak on constructing the questionnaire. I wanted to do interview method, but Vikash said that all these topics have been taken up by others.
सॉरी
So
सर इसके लिए
हाँ, so मैं कोशिश करूंगा कि hypothesis पे मैंने कल से पढ़ा सुबह से पढ़ ही रहा हूँ Buddha and heart and all. So in fact जब हम लोग we belong to that generation when research methodology was not taken as a very serious subject. Professor MP Singh probably used to teach us, and it was like, but we learned all the way as a struggling author by doing research, and especially this survey method, social survey method, because of my association with CSDS, Lot Niti, doing the election surveys and trying to read the data and cull out the. So somehow I have learned certain things. Anyway, I would try to be helpful. So first thing, like in a research article, first thing like when you do your research, I suppose that you all are doing PhD. Vikasji, you all are doing PhD. Our students are doing PhD,
yes
right?
sir some are assistant professors yes
Some are assistant professors,
yes
but they have done their PhD.
yes sir
Okay, so I know. In fact, I would have spoken very well on how to write a research paper. You want me to speak about it? How to write a research paper? On the way it can come also. But this is also
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
required.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So that is like the topic which I always love to speak. See, like the first thing I would like to say in my 45 minutes presentation is that whenever you do research, you should have a question. So why do we do research? Why do we undertake the research for writing a thesis or for writing an article or writing a book? Uh, we do it for our career promotion. We do it for APA score. We do it to become a lecturer. All these things are all right, no problem with that. But basically, for becoming a good researcher, you should have a genuine research interest. You should, as a social scientist, we observe some phenomena and then we try to make sense of that phenomena. I can give you an example. For example, like somebody who is working on, say, Hindu-Muslim relationship, the way the Muslim Hindu relationship has worked out, can think of, say, Muzaffarnagar and can ask this question that in Muzaffarnagar, basic hypothesis, if you go through the writings of on the Hindu-Muslim relationship, Stephen Wilkinson, Ashutosh Varshney, Paul Brass, or others, if you go through as an engineer, you go through that the common factor in all these work on the Hindu-Muslim conflict or the riot is that if there is a sizable population of Hindus and Muslims in some area, there is always a possibility of a conflict. Now, if you see the Varshney thesis is that if the Hindus and the Muslims they have a close associational relationship, and in fact, even if they have close everyday relationship, there is a less possibility of a ethnic conflict. There is a less possibility. That is the main hypothesis of the book by Varshney, ethnic conflict in India, ethnic conflict and civic life, Hindu-Muslim relation in India, the celebrated book. You must read the introduction of that book. So that is the kind of a question one can raise in the case of Muzaffarnagar, where the Hindus and Muslims were have had associational relationship. Basically, they come from the same ethnic stock, and in the field, like the Hindus are the landlords, the Muslims are the laborers, and there was no history of ethnic conflict, and all of a sudden there was a ethnic conflict in the 2015 or 2014, if I remember correctly. So this kind of question can come up, that why all these years there is now a conflict in this area which was always peaceful, and what does it tell about the hypothesis of Varshney? This Varshney also raised this question, in the case of like his work, that he asked this question, that why Lucknow has been peaceful, where the Hindus and Muslims are in sizable number, and why Hyderabad has been always prone to ethnic conflict, and there also Hindus and Muslims are in sizable number. So he had the three set of cities, and he said that Calicut being peaceful and Aligarh being uh, prone to conflict. So this kind of thing. So now what I'm saying is that as a social science researcher, you observe some phenomena and you try to make sense of that phenomena, and you look for possible answer. So that possible answer, that possible explanation becomes your hypothesis, right? So that way, this and how to reach to an hypothesis, how to reach to a kind of explanation. One way of reaching to an explanation can be having a peer group discussion. I mean, you discuss with the fellow researcher. That can be one way of um, uh, trying to make sense of the phenomena, that why this is happening, what can be the causal factor. Or you can go to the library and you can read all the literature which you find on the subject, the good literature review also is a test of your your discretion, like what kind of literature you choose, whether the literature you are selecting lived in the society, so you have a sense, you read newspaper, you watch the society around you, so you use your intuition to look for a possible explanation. Second, I said that you have a peer group discussion, you discuss with your fellow researcher and you try to think of what can be the possible explanation for some phenomena. Third can be that you go to the library and you do the library based research, you read the literature, you read the theories, all those theoretical work which has culled out from a concrete study, and then you reach to certain central argument, certain tentative argument or explanation. So that way, hypothesis is very important, especially in a quantitative research. When you do the field work, you go to the field, you go with a hypothesis, you go with some kind of argument, which argument may be proven untrue or not really applicable on the ground. So that can be also a kind of a research. So we say that hypothesis can be considered as a fundamental building block of all social science research. So you need to have a hypothesis, you need to have an argument. When you write an article, there is always a kind of a subsection in that article which says central argument. So if you do not have an argument in a paper, then your paper becomes an essay. It doesn't remain a research article. Like जो हिंदी भाषी हैं उनको याद होगा निबंध और लेख, इसमें क्या अंतर होता है. My teacher in Netherlands used to tell us that लेख ऐसा है जो सबको मालूम है, सबको खबर हो गई है. So it's very kind of general. Nibandh is personal. So research article also is something, it should contribute to the domain knowledge. How can you contribute to the domain knowledge? You can contribute to the domain knowledge in a very different ways. Like my supervisor, Professor Neera Chandot, used to say that you can be, like you defend your thesis when you go for the final interview for your PhD degree. Then there can be two ground. One ground can be, or that can be the ground for your publishability of your research also. Either you intervene with a fresh perspective in the ongoing debate. That can be your claim. You know, like some debate is going on and some questions are left unanswered, or there is one aspect of the whole problem which is not being taken up. And if you take that question or you take that aspect for your research, that can be your contribution. So on that basis, you can defend your research. Your research can be publishable. Or alternatively, if you are gifted or you are lucky, you come out with some original research finding. And third can be that if you contribute to the, and that I'm adding. So two things I said: either you intervene in the ongoing debate with a fresh perspective, with a fresh set of questions, or with a different kind of locale, the space and the time. For example, like say, Atul Kohli did a study in 1986, State and Poverty in India, his PhD thesis, right? And he asked this question that all the political parties they come to power saying that we want to come to power to reduce poverty. And he said that why some states have done better other than other states when there is a centralized development planning model. At that time, it was a planned economy. India was like having one economy, and Central was calling all the shots. And then he took up three states. He took West Bengal as the most successful state in combating poverty. He took Madhya Pradesh as the, sorry, Karnataka as the middling state, and Uttar Pradesh as the least successful in combating the poverty. Now, what you can do is that you can ask the same question, because poverty reduction remains on the agenda of all political parties, right? All these freebies and the welfare, this is very much on the agenda of all parties. They come to power not to serve themselves, they come to power to serve the people, right? So, but again, some states are doing better than other states in removing poverty. And you can take three different states, the same criteria, but you can take some other state. Obviously, West Bengal would not be the among the first states to do better. There are states like Maharashtra, Gujarat, they must have done much better in removing poverty. So you can take Gujarat, you can take some Madhya Pradesh or middling state, some other state, or you can take Kerala as the most successful. You can take, say, Gujarat as the middling. You can take Bihar as the least successful, and then you can take up this study. So you can change the space, you can change the time, and you can say that I'm doing this research in 2024 when there has been an economic transition, and I ask the same question and I look for the possible answer, right? So that can be one way of doing it. Or you can bring in more data. So that can be also your contribution. So three things: either you come out with some original research, or you intervene in the ongoing debate on the literature, you add to the literature, like the Marxian, neo-Marxist. So it's like a liberal, neoliberal. So you are coming with you are contributing to the existing literature. Third can be that you bring in more data, you bring in more information. Information doesn't mean that you dump your research with more and more information, and the analytical part or the critical part is missing, right? So that can be that can be the way of doing the research. And here you can see that when you come out with some original hypothesis that contributes to the your research. Otherwise you remain directionless, you go to the field and you do not, because your questionnaire would be tailored according to your central argument. Like, you want to, why do you administer questionnaire? You administer questionnaire in order to prove your hypothesis correct, your correct, uh, that should revolve around your central argument. So that is why I said that the hypothesis is a kind of a fundamental building block of your research, and it's a kind of a principal instrument in your research. It allows you to suggest new experiments and observe the phenomena. So, uh, you know, I would also say that hypothesis defines the research topic and the researcher ideas about it. So, and it provides a tentative explanation for the phenomena. Tentative explanation, I said, because that explanation may not be proven true. So it's a kind of a tentative. It's not like a final. And then when you conduct your research and you come out with the facts, because this building hypothesis, one thing is very important, that your hypothesis should be persuasive, and it should be such that that can be tested. So testability is very important, and persuasion is also very important. So you have to conduct your research in a way that your hypothesis seems convincing, not only to you but also to your reader, also to your reviewer, right? So it's not enough like that's a movie like Amitabh Bachchan movie Keh Diya Na Bas. So it's not like you have said and this is final. You have to, for example, any good work, like when we write some article or something, if there is an important research question, that question should be there. Like I was referring to Varsney. So if you read the Varsney book, at the end of the book, he has also given you the questionnaire. So you can question the questionnaire. You can question the wording of the questionnaire. You can say that why these questions have been asked. Should this question be framed like this, or it should have been framed in a different way? So this is also very important, that the hypothesis should be such which can be proven and which should be persuasive, right? And which should be testable. So testable, like आप ये नहीं कह सकते कि अब मानसून फेलियर हो रहा है क्योंकि किसान जो है वो पापी हो गए हैं, किसान अब धर्म में विश्वास नहीं करते, people the farmers have become irreligious or anti-religion, or they are not really worshipping the rain god, and that's why the monsoon is not working well. This cannot be tested, right? Or existence of God, can you test it? So you have to have a hypothesis which can be empirically tested, which can be tested and which can be persuasive. So if you have to define hypothesis, then it should be in a form of proposition or a set of proposition which is presented as an explanation, right? A proposition which is presented as an explanation for the occurrence of some phenomena, some social phenomena, and it is asserted as a provisional conjecture to guide some investigation or something like. And it can be also on the basis of, because as I told you, the Atul Kohli, like how does he find the three states? How does he choose the three states? Obviously he must have done some preliminary work, right? And he must have gone through the data or the government report to find out which state is doing better, which state is not doing well. So that is something he must have done before choosing the three states. And when he went for the hypothesis, his hypothesis was Atul Kohli hypothesis was that those states have done much better in poverty eradication, where the states are being ruled by a political party whose support base comes from the working class and the landless farmers. The party has a pro-poor ideology, and most importantly, the party is a cadre-based party, so that the party workers keep tab on the government servants to see whether the pro-poor policies are being implemented or not. I repeat, Atul Kohli hypothesis was that those party regimes, those political regimes are more successful in combating poverty where the party has a pro-poor ideology, number one. Second, where the party receives support, overwhelming support from the poor farmers and the working class. And third, that the party has a party is a cadre based party or organizationally strong party, so that the party workers can keep an eye on the government servants whether they are implementing the pro-poor policy at the grassroots level or not. So this is how that was his hypothesis, and then he chose three states: the state which was most successful, the state which was middling, and the state which was least successful. And then he did his field work, doing the interviews, and then he tried to prove that his hypothesis was correct. Something which was taken up by John Harris also in a EPW article 1999. He took up the same question, but then this time he not only took three states, he took so many states. And then he tried to show that those states where there has been assertion from below, there has been a kind of the states which are movement politics states, like the South, like the Tamil Nadu, the Dravidian movement, Kerala, the Narayana Guru movement, Ambedkarite movement in Maharashtra. So he tried to Telangana, like this area, where there has been some kind of left movement or say radical movement of the farmers or the working classes or the lower classes. Those states have done much better in poverty eradication. That study was in 99. Of course, exceptions would be there. So social basis of political power. So where the social basis of political power has expanded, there has been much more success in dealing with the poverty. So that kind of hypothesis he had. So this is something which I wanted to say, tell you that hypothesis is a kind of a explanation for the occurrence of some phenomena or a group of phenomena, right? From where the hypothesis comes from, right? So before that, the hypothesis is kind of a linking, kind of a establishing the relationship between two or more variables, right? So, like relating, say, the level of literacy to democracy, democratic success, or saying that democracy advantage and the social and economic empowerment. So, kind of relating to the two or more variable, and that is what the job of the hypothesis, right? So the attempt, when we build a hypothesis, our attempt is to explore as to in what way an independent variable is thought to affect, influence, or say alter a dependent variable. So independent variable and dependent variable. Like here, if I say the literacy enhances the success of democracy in a country, wide level literacy, or income is a great predictor of success of democracy. Income is a great predictor of the success of a democracy. Here, the democracy success of democracy becomes a dependent variable, and the income or the income becomes a independent variable, right? So from where the hypothesis emanate? It emanate from different sources, right? It emanate from the theory, like Good and Hart. I was reading this book, in the morning. I spent some 2 hours on this. So it says that, and I can quote it from here. It says that you have to read the literature, and they have to emanate. They have to come from the theory. They have to come from a theory or a theoretical framework. So, for a good, definitive, testable hypothesis, that is his language, good, definitive, testable hypothesis, it should come from theoretical literature. So, you read the literature and then you draw your hypothesis. That is something which I said, library based research, right? And then it may come from your direct observation or the intuition also. As I said, that can be also the way. Sometime you can have some insight, like you can base your hypothesis on your instinct, I would not say, but your the the guesses also can be the informed guesses. So it's not that you just make a wild guess, right? Uh, so you make a statement, educated guesses, yes. So it's a kind of a making a explicit statement indicating as to how a researcher thinks that the social phenomena of interest, the two set of phenomena, they are interrelated to each other, right? Now, like another thing which is very important is that uh, like I give you an example, like say when the research question can be that why Afghanistan has been experiencing social turmoil, or we can say, now we can also say Syria has been is experiencing social turmoil, or the Gulf countries, the Arab countries have been most of the Arab countries have been experiencing social turmoil. uh, then we can conclude that it may be because the population is illiterate, poor, and ethnically diverse. I mean, that would be true for Syria. That would be true for many other countries, especially Afghanistan, where there is a great degree of illiteracy, poverty, and ethnic diversity. People are diverse on the tribal basis. So here we are proposing uh, four factors. We are trying to relate literacy, wealth, ethnic similarities, and political stability. So we are trying to relate that why there is a political instability, and we are linking it to the ethnic dissimilarity, or like turmoil. So social turmoil is related to lack of literacy, lack of wealth, lack of ethnic similarity, and lack of political stability. Another thing, unit of analysis, that is also important in a hypothesis building. Like if I say that unit of analysis, like most of the, it can be individual, it can be group, it can be state, it can be region. So here you are, like I take one hypothesis, for example. Say like right now the Lok Sabha is going on, so session is going on. So if there is a legislation on, say, one nation, one poll, so members of the Lok Sabha who belong to BJP or NDA, they are more likely to vote for this legislation desired by the BJP. Obviously, BJP would introduce it, than the parties which provide outside support. Now, so there may be some parties which are giving outside support, like YSR and all. So they are also likely to support. So here, individual members are the unit of analysis. I am saying, I repeat, members of the Lok Sabha who belong to NDA, they are vote for more likely to vote for legislation uh, introduced by the BJP than the members of the parties which provide outside support. So here, who are the unit of analysis? Individual members are the unit of analysis. So you should not mix the different units of analysis in the same hypothesis. So if it is the member, it should be the member. You cannot like say that more education a person has, the more democratic his country is. Now here you are relating the person with the country, right? If you say the more education the population or the citizens of a country has, the more democratic the country would be. That was acceptable. But saying that more education a person has, the more democratic his country is, that would be something which is not a good hypothesis. So there should be a unit, there should be kind of a same unit of analysis. If you are using individual, it should remain individual, the both independent as well as dependent variable. So what is a good hypothesis? What are the features of a good hypothesis? A, and this you can write down. I would send you the notes also, which I have prepared through Vikas. That took me quite some time. First time in my life I took it this thing. So, what is a good hypothesis? Obviously, this you can say on your own also without reading any book, that it should be tested. It can be tested adequately. So, if there is a hypothesis which cannot be tested, there is no use of building that kind of hypothesis. That is not going to work, because you have to, whatever the argument you make in a research article or in your research thesis or in your, any research writing, you have to, because what is research writing? It is kind of making a claim. Whenever you write something, you make a claim that why you say that my article should be accepted, why your article should be accepted for publication, why you should be given your PhD degree, because you have you know come out with some contribution. You have contributed to the domain knowledge. You have raised, even if you raise original question, that is also your contribution. But obviously when you raise original questions, then or the you raise the research question, you should answer them also. Just raising research question is not going to be sufficient. It may be necessary but not sufficient. So a good hypothesis should be tested. It can be tested adequately and persuasively. It should persuade also others to accept your hypothesis. Second, that hypothesis formulation is a systematic process. It's not like that you have to, you have to have the precise idea about the concept, uh, accurate or the precise idea of a concept. You should be able to define that the concept, like if you use the word ethnic conflict, what do you mean by ethnic conflict? Ethnic conflict can be the conflict between the white and the black. It can be based on race. It can be based on religion. It can be based on caste. So language. So what kind of ethnic conflict you are talking about when you use the word affirmative policy? How affirmative policy and the policy of protective discrimination, they differ from each other. So, so this is also very important, that your hypothesis should be stated formally, clearly, and precisely. The terms which are being used, or the concept which are being used, they should be they should have a precise meaning. For example, secularism can have a multiple meaning. So, in what context you are using that term secularism in your hypothesis? That should be made very clear, right? So, this is a good hypothesis should be stated formally, clearly, and precisely. It should be capable of being tested, that I said again and again. Third, it should state relationship between the variables if it happens to be a relational hypothesis. So in a case of a relational hypothesis, if you are taking two variables, independent variables, there should be a relationship between the two variables, or you are a multiple variable would be very difficult to establish, but two variables are always much more workable. So you can try to state, so your hypothesis to state clearly the relationship between the two variables. Then it should be limited in scope. Hypothesis should be limited in scope. It should not be too general. Good and Hart also makes that point, that hypothesis should not be too general. It should be limited in scope and it should be specific, so that you can focus
क्या
on
बोल रहे
that
हो?
and you can easily
अभी
go
नहीं
to the field and
है?
try to test your
तुम
hypothesis. That can be
तो बस
possible
10 मिनट
only
बचा है
when it
सेशन
is
का,
specific and it is limited in scope.
ले लिया है?
It's narrower. That's very important. Uh,
ले आए हो? ले
then
आए
it
हो?
should be consistent
तो
with the
10 मिनट रुक
most
जाओ,
known
समाप्त हो
facts,
रहा है,
or say should be
सेशन एंड हो रहा
consistent
है.
with a substantive body of tested facts. So that can come out only when you go through the literature on the concerned subject. So it should not be like, it should be consistent with the most known facts. Otherwise, your hypothesis is not going to work on the ground. Uh, then it should be amenable to testing within a reasonable time. That is also important. You should not take, so like you cannot take like the whole, like all the democratic countries in the world, taking as a kind of democracies in the world, democracies as a kind of a one variable. Then there are so many countries which claim to be a democracy. So how many countries you can cover? So it should be, hypothesis should have a narrow scope, it should be narrow, and it should be such which can be testable within a reasonable time with a limited resources. So that is also very important. Your time and your money, and that should be also a factor in framing your hypothesis. It must explain the facts that give rise to the need for explanation. So empirical reference should be also there. Uh, Adequate hypothesis statement about two variables should indicate which variable predicts or causes the other, and how changes in one variable are related to changes in other. Like an increase in education will result in a decrease in prejudices. So here, if and then, it's a conditional statement. An increase in education will result in decrease in prejudices. So if you are more educated, you would be less prejudiced. So increase in education is an important factor here, and it's a kind of a conditional statement, if and then. So an increase in education, if there is an increase in education, then there would be decrease in uh, prejudices, right? So a hypothesis should be an empirical statement, educated guesses about relationship that exist in the real world, not the statement what out to be true or about what a researcher believes should be the case, right? So, saying having a hypothesis like Sri Lanka should respect the civil and political rights of the Tamil people, or Bangladesh should respect the civil and political rights of the Hindus, this is not a good hypothesis, because it is something you are you are not coming out with an empirical statement. You are saying what ought to be. It's a normative statement. So that is not a good hypothesis, right? So a good hypothesis would be that, like, you know, that a democracy is a democratic country is a democratic country respect the civil and political rights of the minorities if the population is you know if the if no if there is a, let me try to reformulate, a a country respects the civil and political rights of the minorities if there is if the country has a high level of democratic high level of democratic uh, uh, awareness, or is more democratic, no, high degree of democracy. For example, something like a work I remember, like somebody did work like a degree of democracy, that like how in India some states have a higher degree of democracy than other states. So compare Kerala with the UP and said that how this is happening, that in the same country you have different kind of different level of democracy. Or say Rob Jenkins saying that every state is a kind of a mini democracy. So this is something. So a good hypothesis would be democracy exists only where the population is literate and affluent. So here, it proposes an explanation that why democracy exists. Democracy exists only where the population is literate and affluent. So uh, so here you have to empirically observe what is the level of literacy, what is the level of affluence among the people, and then you can see that whether it has helped the democracy to succeed. Like this, there is a work like I'm just forgetting the 147 countries were studied, and it was found that those countries which had a high level of income, there the democracies had the chance to survive, and the countries which were poor, where the level of poverty was very high or the income level was very low, then those countries did not survive as democracies. So this can be also a kind of a research, right? Uh, so this can be empirically proven, right? The point is that it can be empirically proven that the level of income is a great predictor of the success of democracy in a country, and that you can prove it by going through the data culled from different countries, the level of their income of the common people, the general per capita income, and you can relate it to the success of democracy or the failure of democracy. Uh, then another another example of a good hypothesis would be that there should be some logical reason for thinking that it might be confirmed. So, a good hypothesis should be plausible also. For example, a good hypothesis can be that vegetarians are more likely to be the supporters of the BJP than the people who are non vegetarian. You understand that the BJP is a kind of there is a certain degree of religiosity in the ideology of the BJP. So the vegetarians, Hindus, those who are Sanatanis, and many Hindus, they believe that vegetarianism is good, is very much required. So you can have this kind of hypothesis that the vegetarians are more likely to be the supporters of the BJP than the people who are non-vegetarian are more likely to be the supporter. This you can have this kind of hypothesis, and probably you can prove it also by doing the surveys in taking a representative sample. So another thing is that the hypothesis should be specific. This I have said earlier also. It should be specific rather than of a general nature. So, for example, I give you two hypotheses. Like one can be the a country's geographic location matters for the type of defense policy it develops. Now, geographical location of a country matters for the type of defense policy it develops. Now, how can you prove it? Like there are so many countries and they have their own geographical locations. So how can you? It's plausible, but it's very different. You know, it's a general. I'm not saying that this kind of hypothesis is wrong. Obviously, geography does matter in framing the defense policy of a country, but then how to prove it? That is there. If you take up this hypothesis for your thesis, it would be very difficult for you to defend your hypothesis, right? You have to take so many countries, and there would be always difficulty, in proving it. Whereas if you say that if you take a specific hypothesis, and that would be like in the case of India, you can take it. The more borders a country shares with other countries, the more likely that the country is to have outstanding problem with the neighboring country. This is true for, to some extent, China. China has the boundary with so many countries, and China has had outstanding problem with the neighboring countries. It's not only India. There are so many countries. China had a problem with Russia. China had a problem with Vietnam. China had a problem with Cambodia. So, uh, to some extent, that also true for India, because India shares boundary with Bangladesh, Pakistan, Sri Lanka. It's surrounded by the neighboring countries, and India shares with the boundary with these countries. These countries do not share boundary with each other. So that is something which is a factor in the India's foreign policy, India's neighborhood policy, right? So if you have a specific hypothesis. Like I repeat, the more borders a country shares with other countries, the more likely that the country is to have outstanding problem with the neighboring country. This makes sense. This can be, you can take, say, for your test case, you can take China, you can take some other country which has a boundary with many countries, any other country which comes to your mind. India would be another country, China would be one country, then you can also refer Israel, many countries. You can Arab in Arab countries you have those kind of problem where the country has so many surrounded by Israel would be a good example. So its defense policy would be, uh, you know, uh, it has outstanding problem with the neighboring countries. So uh, now I said that the hypothesis would be testable. So what can be the example? Like God created the universe. It would be very difficult to. It would be impossible to have the evidence to show that. Uh, but if you have a hypothesis like the far more Muslims vote for the UPA than for the NDA or UPA now it has become India Alliance. So far more Muslims vote for the India India Alliance Party than for the NDA. This can be tested. You can have a social survey method, and this has been, in fact, in the CSDS Lokniti survey, it has been found that if there is a direct conflict between the BJP and some other party, then the Muslims have been voting for the party which they think is more likely to defeat BJP. So this is something this can be tested. So hypothesis should be testable. It should not be something which cannot be tested, and that can be that is not really going to happen. Uh, the hypothesis should not be tautological also. Tautological means that it should not be the statement which is linking two concepts that mean essentially the same thing. For example, the less support there is for a country's democratic institutions, the more tenuous the stability of that country's democratic system. So the less support there is for a country's democratic institution, the more tenuous would be the stability of that country's democratic system. So we are saying the same thing. Less support there is for a country's democratic institutions, there would be more problem for the stability of that country's democratic system. So democratic institution, democratic system, it's conveying the same thing, you know. So you cannot have this kind of two statement trying to link the two statement which are saying the same thing. So, how to arrive at a working hypothesis? I have already said that you discuss with the colleagues, you discuss with the peer group, you discuss with the experts, because you know research writing is a formal writing. Research writing is a scholarly writing. We also use the word expression scholarly writing. So you write not for the man on the street, with due respect to the man on the common man, but then when you do your research writing, you are writing for the peer group. So for also working out your good hypothesis, you should have a discussion with expert, somebody who has done work in the same area. For example, you are working on some parties or something, you can write to Sridharan and you can seek his opinion that if you are working on, say, coalitional system or Professor Kailash, you can refer to him. So this is one, the discussion with the colleagues or as well as the experts about the research problem, its origin, objective in seeking a solution. That can be one way of arriving at a working hypothesis. Second, that specifying the research question is also important. So when you have a proper research question, constructing the research question is very important. In fact, I deliver a lecture on this, constructing the research question. So when you construct a proper research question, then only you can try to come out with a hypothesis. If your question is flawed, the way you are constructing the question is flawed, then how can you come out with a good hypothesis? Because what is hypothesis? Basically, it's a tentative answer to the research question which you are raising, right? So Uh, and also that the relevance and the importance of the research question, that is also very important. like like asking this question, like why do we have more violence in industrial cities? Like you think of Bokaro, Raurkela, you know, Bokaro, I especially I would mention, you know, these industrial cities which came up after the independence. They are also like Chandigarh, you know, they came out in order to cater to the people working in this large public industrial sector like HEC and all. They are all prone to the violence. So why they are prone violence? There, I think Vashney argument which I said would be applicable, because there the people uh, uh, really they come from the different areas and they don't have any relationship with each other. Like the migrant population settling down in Dharavi and also that those areas, the slums and all, they would be always like the Yamuna Par, East German, East Delhi. You know, there would be always the chances of violence because the people they do not relate to each other. Uh, Research problem you choose, research question you choose, they may be related to the public policy, may be related to your thing. This is not important, so I leave it out. Uh, the types of hypothesis I have written also written it also types of hypothesis. There's one null hypothesis where there is no relationship between two variables. When we analyze data to test a hypothesis, and we often work with the null hypothesis and attempt to disprove it. Correlative hypothesis, the relationship between two or more concepts. This I have already discussed. The directional hypothesis, for example, if a person's years of formal education increases, the person income increases. So here you have years of formal education, increase in the years of formal education is related to the increase in the income of the person. Or with more literacy, political processes become more democratic. So here you are relating literacy, the level of literacy, if it increases, then the political processes also become more democratic. So here, hypothesis would be disproved if there is no relationship between the two concepts or if the relationship is in opposite direction. So डायरेक्शनल हाइपोथेसिस में आप क्या कर रहे हो कि दोनों एक दूसरे पे डिपेंडेंट हैं और इफ एंड देन वाला मामला है और अगर आप उसको प्रूव कर सकते हो तो ठीक है अगर नहीं करते हो यू कैन यू फाइंड मे फाइंड दैट it's not always happening that if the person's year of formal education increases, the income also increases. So that can be it can be tested on the ground. Then causal hypothesis, so directional hypothesis मैंने बात करा, null hypothesis and correlative hypothesis. I've given you the example. Directional hypothesis also I've given you the example. Now there can be a causal hypothesis where the relationship between two or more variable and it is very most difficult to confirm, like literacy, affluence, and cultural homogeneity cause democratic movements in countries. So now here you are finding that literacy, affluence, and cultural homogeneity cause democratic movements in countries. Now this is something which would be very difficult to confirm because you are taking countries. You are not taking one country. You are taking too many countries, and you are taking too many variables: literacy, affluence, cultural homogeneity. Now there may be a country where there is a successful democratic movement, which where there is a high level of literacy, but that country may not be affluent. So this is something relating three factors that the country should be literate, should be affluent, and should have a cultural homogeneity for making a success of a democratic movement. This is a tall
Ashutosh,
order. This would be very difficult to prove it, right? Then antecedent independent dependent. So how can you have a different type of hypothesis? More formal education will lead to an increased level of electoral participation. Here, formal education becomes an independent variable. More formal education will lead to an increased level of electoral participation. Increased level of participation becomes dependent, and sense of civic duty becomes intervening
हाँ
variable.
सचिन,
So
हाँ
there are
सचिन।
three variable: independent variable,
95 है, 90,
formal
95।
education, sense of civic duty,
95 ले
intervening
लो।
variable, electoral outcome
हाँ
becomes a dependent variable. So in this hypothesis, I repeat, more formal education will lead to an increased level of electoral participation. You have three
हाँ हाँ
variable:
हाँ।
independent variable,
ठीक।
intervening variable, and the dependent variable. Another example would be a person who favored India signing India-Russia agreement on oil was more likely to vote for BJP candidate in 2024 election than a person who did not support India's stand. Or take another hypothesis: a person who favored Narendra Modi as the prime ministerial candidate would be is more likely to vote for the BJP candidate in 2024 election than a person who did not support the prime ministerial candidature of Narendra Modi. So this is something here you can have the uh, uh, two factors like a person and it's the same unit of analysis, a person, a voter, है ना? In the case of Narendra Modi, a voter, or in case of somebody who is supportive of the India-Russia agreement on oil, despite the European Union objection to it, is more likely to vote for the BJP. This thing. So यहाँ पे dependent variable क्या है? 2024 poll और independent variable क्या है? Independent variable यहाँ पे है रशिया, है ना? कि Russian the attitude towards India Russia agreement और antecedent क्या है? Energy situation. So if India would not have gone for Russia's or Russian oil, probably India would have bleeded a lot because otherwise the oil is very costly in the other markets. But Russia is providing India oil at a cheap rate. So this is something how you do this hypothesis building. So I try to uh, to be helpful as far as the maybe like I should be thankful to Vikas to ask me to speak on hypothesis. So I would say that in quantitative research you must have a kind of a hypothesis. You must have an argument. There, I mean, how do I see it? Like most of the time, like I did a work on federalism in India review paper last 2 months back. So I took an argument that what was my argument. Let me first state my research question. My research question was that can we say that the center state relation has always remained static? So my argument was that no, the center state relation has not been static, even despite the fact that our constitution has a strong center framework, but it has been like a pendulum that the balance of power between the center and the state has been moving has been transitory. So despite the similar constitutional legal structure which has remained intact, there has been a transition that sometimes the center has got more power than what it is given in the constitution, and sometimes even the states have got more autonomy vis-a-vis the center, despite the same constitutional structure remaining intact. And then my hypothesis was that this is dependent on three factors. One, that the ideology of the party in power at the center. Second, that the nature of the first would be the nature of the party system in India, whether it is a dominant party system or it's a coalitional fragmented party system. Second, the party in power at the center, what kind of ideology the party has, whether it's a centralist ideology or it has a federalist ideology. And third, that what is the leadership style of the leader at the top. So if the party in power at the center has a colossal leader, then what is the leadership style of that person? Whether that leader believes in person-centered leadership or the leader believes in a kind of a collective leadership. So these were the three variables which I took in order to say, in order to defend my hypothesis that the balance of power between the center has and the state has not remained stagnant. It has been moving from one direction to another direction like a pendulum. So thank you very much. I try to be helpful. I think I've taken more than 1 hour. So thank you very much. Yeah.
No, no issues, sir. Thank you so much for
So
your
this was
valuable
something
lecture, sir.
I would have
Thank
been far more useful if you would have written like, how to write a paper or how to construct a speech. These two, three topics I have worked out
yes,
somehow. Uh, but then hypothesis also, like you you come out with some argument and you try to prove it. And remember another thing, the framing research question. I said that if you build a hypothesis, you should have a research question also. So when you frame your research question, don't try to frame too many research questions. My suggestion would be that one research article should have one argument, and it should have one research question and one hypothesis. There should not be too many hypotheses. You should not be like a one hypothesis and then dependent hypothesis. No, not like this. Have one hypothesis and have one central research question. There can be related research question, but there should be one research question and there should be one hypothesis, central argument. Thank you.